Welcome to the New Chuan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. In this episode, we continue our look at the 1993 Bagua Journal article on Luo De Xiu. At this point, Luo is talking about his teaching method and his approach to Bagua Zhang, and he discusses the sort of three stages of development that you go through in Bagua Zhang. And then in the Patreon, we continue with Luo De Xiu, but this time he's talking about his grand teacher, Zhang Zhengfeng, and the development of the Yizhong system. So he goes into detail on the practices and methods that his grand teacher used to teach his teacher. All right. I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.
Today we return to our discussion of Luo De Xiu, the internal martial arts teacher from Taiwan, featured in the old issue of Bagua Journal, Volume 3, Number 5, from August 1993. So we talked about last time some of his experiences and his early years of learning. And so now the article switches over to Luo's approach to teaching Bagua Zhang. And the author of this is Dan Miller, who's a fantastic internal martial arts writer whose Bagua Journal was inspiring to all of us who were training back in the 90s. And if you really want the inside scoop on Bagua and Xingyi, I think you'll find it very valuable. So let's start here. It says, ever since Robert W. Smith returned from Taiwan to write about the internal family of martial arts that he observed and studied while he was living there, many American martial artists have dreamed about traveling to China to study. Some have made the trip to China and after studying for several years returned to the United States to open up schools and teach what they learned. Others have made numerous short trips to China to study for a few months at a time and bring back the knowledge they gained while studying there. Many of the practitioners who studied in China have made a name for themselves in this country by running successful schools, writing books and magazine articles, and producing instructional videotapes. While this group of practitioners has become well known to the martial arts in the United States and other areas of the world, there is another extremely dedicated group that is not so well known. They are the practitioners who traveled to Taiwan nearly a decade or more ago and have stayed there. They continue to study, they continue to practice, and they continue to improve. Many of these students that have been in Taiwan ranging from 8 to 20 years are in Luo De Xiu's Bagua Zhang class. After speaking with Luo, watching him teach class, and watching him demonstrate and apply his Bagua Zhang, it is very easy to see why so many of these hardcore practitioners have gravitated to his class. So that's interesting. So back in the 90s, he's talking about, the people who are putting out videotapes and some who'd been to China. I mean, China had only opened up, 80s. So China had only kind of been open maybe 10 years at that point. So it's quite a different world from now. But now I think a lot more people have traveled to China and come back with whatever teachings they had there, and also brought back, say, official sort of government approved styles, but also people who've traveled to the hinterlands and studied family styles and so on. So I think nowadays there's a massive variety compared to back then. It was a lot easier to get to Taiwan to train back then. So I think that might have been the default place to go. But I think he makes a good point that, as far as I'm concerned, the way Luo De Xiu teaches is definitely one of the best people you could get with, whether you're going to China or Taiwan, as far as I'm concerned.
China was still very tight with everything in the 80s and early 90s. So things hadn't really started to spread too much, where in Taiwan, it was a bit looser in terms of Americans could go there a bit easier. And so
totally. And Robert Smith opened that door, right, in the 60s. And so he goes on to say that Luo has studied and practiced the martial arts for over 25 years at that point. However, his enthusiasm for Bagua Zhang is still like that of a kid with a new toy. He has deep knowledge of theory and principle. His movement and application of the art is first rate. He is highly skilled at imparting his knowledge to his students, and his teaching is very open and direct. His philosophy is that a teacher should be honest and sincere and teach with an open heart. Luo is also very approachable and easy to talk to. His classes are informal and low-key. He does not have a formal school and he does not advertise. He is content teaching the small group of students who manage to find him through word of mouth. So then he gets into his Luo's approach to teaching. And So he's got some philosophy about teaching and how you want to do it. And on this page, he there's a picture of him adjusting the Hotian posture for his student Tim Cartmel. Tim has lived and studied in Taiwan for over 9 years. So at the time of the article, Tim's still in living in Taiwan before he moved to USA and opened his own MMA school, which is highly successful down there in Long Beach. And it's started to become, a very well-known name, but at the time he was just another student in Lo's class, which is pretty awesome. So Lo's teaching method is very systematic. He feels that in conjunction with walking the circle, the beginner should practice Qigong and other basic exercises, which are designed to open up and gently strengthen specific parts of the body and enhance overall development. Lo states that although everyone naturally has power in their body, the power is not fully connected due to tension, blockage, and lack of optimal body coordination. The first thing the student in Lo's class will learn is Qigong, which is designed to coordinate the body and rid it of its interference so that the body's power can be unified. The Qigong that Lo teaches helps the beginning student reset and rebalance the body by clearing out the effects of old injuries or illness and strengthening weaknesses. Lo begins each of his classes using this Qigong set as warm-up because it exercises every part of the body. So his philosophy is to start with Qigong,
There you go.
which is pretty common among internal martial arts people, I think.
It's how I've always, I mean, yeah.
They're paired. There's just no getting around it. If you're going to do internal
Well,
martial
it's
arts.
the um Qigong is the calisthenics or like, push-ups and sit-ups. If you're doing like karate or judo, right, you're gonna do push-ups and sit-ups and you're gonna run and you're gonna jump and do jumping jacks
Right.
and things
Strength
like that.
training, yeah.
When you do internal martial arts, you're gonna do some kind of moderately stretchy but mostly relaxed, soft thing to get your body kind of in the mode to do, the more complicated stuff. And like he says, it's also about kind of getting rid of the
Mm,
impedances to what, right? Like
mm,
if you have a bad knee or bad back, if you
mm.
get rid of that with the Qigong, it's going to be easier to do Bagua, right? Like
Yeah,
it's like rather than trying to do Bagua with a bad knee, right? Like it just
right.
doesn't work as well.
And he also brings up the idea of most people have the strength, it's just blocked because of bad posture or bad habits or injuries. That's another thing that's a big part of Kumar's philosophy. He'd always say, like, you have the golden treasure inside you, you just have to find a way to access it. It's not making yourself stronger. You've already got the strength. You just have to find the coordination and awareness that'll help open that up and reveal what the inner power that you already
Well,
have. So that's that
yeah,
Qigong philosophy.
that's the inner and the internal martial arts,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Is you're not doing it through strength, you're doing it through accessing your internal connections. And
So after students in Lo's class practice the Qigong set, they will practice a set of basic hand techniques, which are designed to train the body to move in a way which best expresses the body's power. Concentration is placed on training the body to be aligned, connected, and unified so that the student can easily access and use the body's inherent internal power. One of the most direct ways of getting a feel for this unified power is in practicing a movement such as Bongchen, which is most notably used in Xingyi, and trains students in the mechanics and alignments necessary for development of unified whole body power. So I think what they're describing there is what you would call what Lo would call Jiben Gong or Jiben Shofa, which are his series of hand exercises where you shift your weight as you do hand movements of various sorts and sort of unify and connect your body. But it's interesting he mentions Bongchen, which is straight up Xingyi as your foundation practice for doing Bagua, which again, a lot of times Xingyi is used to give you structure and power, which then you apply to doing the more fancier looking Bagua movements. So after practicing Qigong exercises, which help release the tension and open up blockages in the body, and then practicing basic hand techniques, which develop unified body movement and whole body power, the student in Lo's schools will begin to walk the circle and practice the Hotian straight line Bagua sequences. When the student begins the circle walk practice, Lo does not overemphasize the classic principles, such as chest relaxed, pulling the back, or sink the shoulder, drop the elbow. Although he wants the student to become aware of these basic principles, he does not want the beginner to become overwhelmed with too many details. Feeling relaxed and comfortable while remaining smooth and fluid in motion is the priority. His advice to the beginner is to put the feet down softly to develop a sensitivity associated with the foot placement on the ground. He also emphasizes the body movement as a whole and suggests the image of feeling a constant, evenly distributed pressure on all areas of the body as if walking underwater. Now, those are definitely good advice from Lowe and especially that setting your foot down lightly. You want it to be firm, but at the same time, there's something sometimes about making each step like individual, smooth, careful, rather than letting my momentum carry me and I sort of clunk forward. It takes more concentration, but if you make each step a careful, like sort of pressing your hand against a table, like you press your foot against the ground. I think some people like stab their feet into the ground and sort of pound it in an effort to ground themselves. But there is something, and he will sometimes do his shingy the same way, where you reach out into Santi and you let your foot smush into the ground in a more,
Well, it's
I don't know,
balance. It's balance in one sense,
yeah,
right? I mean, you have to have the control to not, need to put your foot
right.
down
You
right
can't
away.
fall onto it is the
Yeah.
problem.
And so that the again, I mean, I think the emphasis on just being natural with it first and then working into the details
Hmm.
is kind of again that outside, it's that post heavens type of
Well,
approach where, and I agree. I mean, I think while
there's
it's
something to be
good
said for it.
if you want to focus on working on things like dropping your chest and lifting your head and wrapping and twisting and opening, closing, doing something like Xingyi or the straight line Bagua or Tai Chi, something where you're not having to continuously walk while you do it,
Yeah.
right? Where you can hold your feet still and move your body around and turn your hips and twist and do all the stuff that you do when you move before you start integrating that into a moving continuously kind of
Yeah.
structure, right? And this is where I think that, there's two approaches, right? Well, there's probably 2000 approaches, but essentially one's, you can get the forms and then work on the walking, or you can get the walking and then work on the forms. And like
Hmm.
Bruce is way more about just like, walk with your hands down for a year and a half
Yeah.
until you're just stable doing it.
And
And
he's not afraid to give you lots of principles and lots of things to work on in very minute detail from day one, which is great on some levels. Like it works for me, but I think for some people it can be overwhelming.
well, lots of details are good. Um,
I
but
came from a school that had no details. So when I got to Kumar's place and he had all the details, that's what I was hungry for.
well,
I think
and
for
I
a
think
raw beginner, though, that can be really hard to try and do it all right, you know?
right. Well, that's what I was going to say is lots of details is great, but knowing what you have to do is more important, right?
Hmm.
That I think what he says about, having too many details gets people to this thing of where they don't really know what to focus on.
Lowe advises beginners to avoid walking a circle which is too small. He recommends that the novice walk a circle which requires at least 12 steps per revolution. When explaining the correct circle walk body posture, Lowe has beginners concentrate on walking smoothly, maintaining a balanced and straight body, clearly executing the ko and bai steps, and remaining natural and comfortable. Lowe also emphasizes that the entire body continuously twists from the yao kwa. However, a strong turning of the kwa inward is not taught at the beginning, and thus the student avoids walking a small circle. The yao kwa is the area of the body which includes the inner thigh, groin, and the hips. Lowe states if the practitioner twists the body from the waist instead of using the yao kwa, the body will not be properly aligned and the whole body power will be disconnected. So that's interesting. Like I like the idea of making sure you don't, because some people have like 8 step circle that you have to match or something like
Right.
that. In the old days, that was one of the things, but he was like, nah, just walk where it till it feels smooth and comfortable, and then you can work on making it smaller. But he also emphasized the turning of the quads, what's driving it, and that is very much a core
Right, but when
Bagua
your
principle.
circle is bigger, the turning of your quad is less, right? So this idea that you do a bigger circle so that your turning is more natural, essentially. And then when you get looser, you can shrink the circle because it's easier to turn. But again, I think this focus on just being able to do it with comfort and stability, those is kind of the way I think of it. Is just like you got to be stable the whole time you're doing it, but you also got to be relatively comfortable with what you're doing. Because if your movements aren't comfortable, that's where you get stuck, right? And so this is that idea of, yeah, it's great to do things that are extreme, but smoothness translates to usage a lot more than extremity does, right?
So he says, if the body is twisted in towards the circle center from the Yao Qua, the Dantian is drawn back, and the positive and negative power in the body is aligned correctly. When walking a small circle, the Qua twists inward to a greater degree. Since most beginners are usually too tight in the Qua area to facilitate necessary amount of rotation, which allows for proper alignment when walking a small circle. Luo has them walk a larger circle until the body has developed sufficiently. So like he'll teach as you twist, it sort of feels like your dantian sort of sinks and settles in the center of your body as you twist towards the center from the waist and hips. And he does differentiate the waist and the qua, which kind of is everything from the waist down, which is interesting because in doing Shaolin with some of my friends lately, the waist is super emphasized. You don't let your hips move, you don't let your thighs move. The quad doesn't really get involved. You just use the top, use that whole upper half of the body to in Wing Wu Gar to sort of swivel off of. And it made me think more about how that qua stuff is so critical to the
So
internal
in
styles.
the way he's using it, the waist is the top of your hip
Yeah, and hip
bone,
up,
right?
kind
And
of.
there's
Yeah,
that sort of where you're above the belly button, essentially,
kind of
right?
above the dantian. Yeah,
Where the
basically, more or
quad is
less.
everything essentially from that down to about
Yeah.
quarter of the way down your thigh, right? So um it's a larger, I mean, I think that's why he uses the term Yao Qua, because it's like waist qua. It's like
Yeah.
it's both things, right? Um, and this is a big thing in Bagua. I mean that it's really where you go from turning that area to uh twisting and coiling that area, right? So the um wrapping the hips and sinking the qua is the
Hmm.
the phrase, right? Lu tong si qua. So
Yeah.
that wrapping and sinking into your qua, that's what he's talking about. When you as you turn, if you don't have the sort of equal amount of ability to twist inward and wrap inward, the twisting is going to bind things up rather than connect it to your legs. And so it's better in the beginning to twist a little bit and to try to work your body in, to kind of um, get into it naturally, essentially, and let the moving, because this is the way these things are designed is if you do it like that, you'll get better at it just by doing it, right? If you push yourself, you'll just get stuck at whatever level you're at. It doesn't actually get better, right? Because the pushing is going to constrict things rather than release them. And so this is that really tricky thing of Bagua where, it's to take the metaphor, you're not the yin part of the thing or the yang part of the thing. You're the line down the middle, right? And so you're constantly playing in that sort of gray area. So the phrase we use is continuous motion, constant stability, right? Everything you do is always connected, but it's also always able to move and to flow and to mush and to change, right? So the continuous change part, right? That's the bit that the change might just be moving from one foot to the other, right? But it's constant. And within that constant change, there has to be something that doesn't allow you to lose your structure.
Right. Well put. Next, he talks about Lowe's teaching philosophy a little bit. While the majority of students Lowe's teaches will begin Bagua practice by learning the Qigong, basic hand techniques, and circle walk, and Ho Tian straight line Bagua, he does not teach every student exactly the same. He states that in teaching, he evaluates each student and determines what they need, how much they need, and when they need it. He says that teaching the internal arts is not simply a matter of presenting a standard curriculum. The teacher needs to determine how to best present the material to each individual, how to give them the right size chunks at the right time, and then teach them how to explore the art on their own to discover the fine points. And that is one thing about internal martial arts. It's hard to teach it just straight from a curriculum standpoint. You don't just start at one and grind through. You have, if you really want to get good at it, you have to go one on one with the person and
Well,
show them the parts they're missing.
that's the art part of it, right? That like any artist, the expression is a little bit different, right? So I think the progression kind of goes like this, right? First, as the teacher, you have to show them what to do and in a way that they can mimic it, right? So you don't show them the most extreme way of doing something. You get them doing something that's within their grasp, right?
Hmm.
And once they can develop
Relate it to
that,
something they know, kind of.
yeah, or at least something that's like with, again, if it take Shingy, right? Chopping wood, you connect it to something, right? Um, but then, at that point they have a base kind of fundamental thing going on, and you can then look at them and say, okay, well, what's missing from that structure in order to go to the next piece of it, right? So for example, if somebody's really like got tight shoulders and a really tight neck, you got to get rid of that before you get them doing things where they got to lift their arms up or things like that. So one way to do that is just to have do some toinar on them or something and release it that way. Another way to do it is to show them a qigong set they can get rid of it. But it's a living thing, and you kind of have to adapt that living thing to each person.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he speaks a little more on that, saying, Lo sees, the way he teaches his students to explore Bagua Zhang beyond the physical movements of the form, emphasizing the importance of the principles that each movement or sequence of movements conveys. Besides expecting students to master the shape of the movements, the principle of body motion inherent in each of the movements should also be clearly understood. Only then will the student be able to reach the higher levels of skill where form and use are united, resulting in spontaneous and creative response. He states that Bagojang is not a system of kung fu techniques as much as it is a conceptual framework which manifests change.
That was the line when I read this. I was like, "Yep, that's it right there." I
No
mean, I,
doubt, right?
you
It's
know,
just the free change is really what you're trying to achieve. By
yeah,
following all these rules, you end up creating that freedom, which is awesome. And that's what makes Bagua dope.
it's jazz, baby.
So Lowe implores his students to look beyond technique and use their mind in investigating the movements of the system to see what each movement is trying to convey in principle. With these principles in mind, the student can examine all Bagua movements and explore every level of a technique moving from big to small, small back to big, from simple to complex, from complex to simple, right to left, left to right, high to low, low to high, inside to outside, outside to inside, stillness to movement, movement back to stillness, from center to 8 directions, from 8 directions back to the center, etc. The possible variations on any one theme become endless. So that's one of the things he likes to do is take one specific movement and then take a downward chop and turn it into an upward chop or a sideways chop or a coming from the outside in chop or from the inside out chop and just like that he likes to connect the sort of generative movements of the circle forms to the endless variety of the straight line forms like in the same way that Xingyi uses the 5 elements to make their 12 animals, in Bagua, you've got these 8 main forms that in this style you use to create 64 straight line sets. And it's really mind opening. It's really cool because like a tiny little movement can also be done as a huge big movement and it looks completely different. But when you break it down, it's the same principle behind both. And that's what gives Bagua that awesome ability to adapt and change and spontaneously do stuff that a technique that you may not have learned necessarily can come out because you're using that same action in a different circumstance. I don't know. There's a certain beauty to that. I think Bagua is one of the best martial arts I've ever seen to really apply that principle. So Lo speaks on something very similar in the sense of, what are these main principles that which the techniques grow out of? It's through the exploration of these concepts that Lo can demonstrate Bagua three fundamental movements. He states that there are three fundamental mechanical principles of movement in Bagua practice. And these principles are exemplified in the movements of single palm change, double palm change, and smooth palm change. He says that all of Bagua movements are born from these three principles of movement, and he demonstrates how every move in the Xintian circle walking Bagua form are simply variations of one or more of these three movement principles. It is fascinating to watch Lo take a movement such as the single palm change and begin to vary it by making small movements big, executing the movement from high to low, or making the movement more complex by adding components of the double palm change or smooth palm change. In taking one or more of these three fundamental movement principles and changing it, Lo can indeed construct all of the Bagua characteristics techniques. Learning how to take the three fundamental movement principles expressed in the single palm change, the double palm change, and the smooth palm change, and construct the 8 guas of the Xintian Bagua is just the beginning of the learning process for Lo students. In teaching the Bagua form, the students in Lo school will transition through 3 levels of development. So that's interesting. He describes 3 different levels of development here. So the first is the 8 mother palms, then Lianhuanzhang, continuous linked palms, and then Yushenjiang, swimming body palm. While many Bagua practitioners will practice separate forms which are identified with these names and others and call their Bagua system Yushen, Bagua, Lianhuanzhang, Lo views these 3 concepts as separate progressive training levels of the same sequence of movements. So he takes the same palm changes and puts them through 3 different stages of training instead of having 3 different sets of palms, which other people do. So the first one is you go step by step and sort of hold them. The second one, you then follow the form work piece by piece and make sure you get it all right. And then swimming body, you take the motion and make it way more fluid and active and spontaneous and just more that swimming effect of just being way more fluid with it, basically, is the way I interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's again, I mean, that's a natural progression that's going to happen anyway, but doing it with a specific intent to do that level of training before you try to do the next one, I think is the important part, right? That, for example, in Bruce's system, you'll learn the single and double palm change, and you'll practice those for a while before you try to mix them and have it become smooth, right? So you in a sense get the single and double to be smooth before you do the smooth. Another level of that is basically the same thing that he said, but when we asked Bruce about this, he said, that smooth is it's a movement, right? There is a smooth palm change, right? Like in our system, it's the third palm change. But it's also a level of accomplishment, right? That when your bagua gets to the smooth level, you have reached a certain level
Yeah.
of skill, right? And there's higher levels than that, right? I mean,
Huh.
there's well, or I should say there's multiple levels within that, right? Because what Bruce said is that smooth is everything after single and double, right? So it's
Sure.
like kind of like what he's saying that when you take single and double and you start mixing them up, you can pretty much get all the other changes, and it's sort of a 0 and 1 kind of thing, right? That from the binary perspective, if you have those two, you can create all the others.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of Kumar's quotes was like you have single palm change, then you have double palm change, and then the next 62 forms are all smooth palm
Right.
change. So that gives you the sense of what you can create with those 2 binaries to make
And
pretty much
and
everything.
whenever they say 64, like Lo said in the thing, it's really infinite, right? Because it's not 64. It's once you get to that point of things being smooth, again, it's because it's like little changes can make it a different thing. So it's actually a lot more than 64. It is infinite because there's never really like, never goes exactly the way you planned it in real life. So that's where the minute little changes, like you might do a seventh palm change hand movement with a double palm change foot movement, right? Like that kind of thing, because you're in a position where you need to do something different than what the form does, but you have that in your trick bag, so it comes out, right? Like it's that kind of thing of you're able to mix and match the techniques in a way that's, it doesn't, it's like musical notes, right? You can mix and match them in as many ways as it doesn't always work, right? It doesn't always sound good,
Yeah,
but that's a different discussion. Whether or not you pick the right combination, that's about skill, right? Like,
right,
but being able to change between them is the precursor to that, I think.
right. And that's that swimming body is skillfully combining all those motions in very smooth, fast manner that stays connected. All right, well, we'll pick it up next time because I think there's a lot more to cover. Now let's jump over to the Patreon and talk about Zhongjin Feng and the origins of the Yizhong system. See you then.
All right. Hey, folks, just a reminder, you can join Patreon for $5 a month and get the bonus episodes as well as extended episodes and our interviews and things like that. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.